Hello everyone, today I'm going to tell you about the Canadian Armed Forces. It's the unified military of Canada, comprising of sea, land, and air elements, referred to as the Royal Canadian Navy, Canadian Army, and Royal Canadian Air Force. Personnel may belong to either the regular force or the reserve force, which has 4 subcomponents: the primary reserve, supplementary reserve, cadet organizations, administration and training service, and the Canadian Rangers. Under the National Defence Act, the Canadian Armed Forces are an entity separate and distinct from the Department of National Defence, which also exists as the civilian support system for the forces. When it comes to military expenditures, it features a budget of $15.5 billion with a 1% GDP. The military service starts at 17 years of age for voluntary male and female military, and 16 years of age for reserve and military college applicants. Canadian citizenship or permanent residence status is required, with a maximum of 34 years of age and a service obligation of 3 to 9 years. When it comes to manpower, it features an active personnel of 68,000 and a reserve of 120,000 with 8 million available. When it comes to the Army, the Canadian Army is the command responsible for the operational readiness of the conventional ground forces of the Canadian Armed Forces. The name Canadian Army came into official use beginning only in 1940. Then before the Confederation until the Second World War, the official designation was Canadian Militia. On April 1st of 1966, as a precursor to the unification of Canada's armed services, all land forces plus the RCAF tactical units were placed under a new command called Force Mobile Command. The Canadian Army persisted as a legal entity for 2 more years before it amalgamated with the Royal Canadian Navy and Royal Canadian Air Force to form a single service called the Canadian Armed Forces. Force Mobile Command was renamed Mobile Command in 1991 and Land Force Command in 1993. Then, in August of 2011, Land Force Command reverted to the pre-1968 title of the Canadian Army. When it comes to land forces, they feature 146 tanks, 3,148 AFVs, and an artillery of 161. The Royal Canadian Navy is the naval force of Canada. It's one of 3 environmental commands within the Canadian Armed Forces. Founded in 1910 as the Naval Service of Canada and given royal sanction on August 29th of 1911, the Royal Canadian Navy was amalgamated with the Royal Canadian Air Force and the Canadian Army to form the Unified Canadian Armed Forces in 1968, after which it would be known as Maritime Command up until 2011. Then in 2011, its historical title of Royal Canadian Navy would be restored. Over the course of its history, the Royal Canadian Navy has served in the First and Second World Wars, the Korean War, the Persian Gulf War, and the war in Afghanistan, along with numerous United Nations peacekeeping missions and NATO operations. Its total Navy fleet features 62 vessels, which include 12 frigates and 4 submarines. The Royal Canadian Air Force is the Air Force of Canada, with its role being to provide the Canadian forces with relevant, responsive, and effective air power. The Royal Canadian Air Force is responsible for all aircraft operations of the Canadian Forces, enforcing the security of Canada's airspace, and providing aircraft to support the missions of the Royal Canadian Navy and Canadian Army. The Royal Canadian Air Force is a partner with the United States Air Force in protecting continental airspace under the North American Aerospace Defense Act. The Royal Canadian Air Force also provides all primary air resources to and is responsible for the National Search and Rescue Program. It features a total of 405 aircraft, which include 103 multi-role and 165 helicopters. Be sure to share your comments below about how you enjoyed this video, and also subscribe with the notification bell turned on so I can bring you more great videos like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.